I never thought a single sentence could change the direction of my entire life. Especially not one spoken on Christmas night, with the tree still lit, wrapping paper on the floor, and the smell of food hanging in the air. Christmas is supposed to be about warmth, about family, about belonging. But that night, sitting at a table surrounded by people who shared my blood, I learned how cold silence can feel after words that should never be said. Words that followed me out the door and stayed with me long after I changed everything about who I was. I grew up believing that no matter how broken things felt, family was still family. We argued, sure. We disagreed. There were old wounds that never really healed. But Christmas was always the one day we pretended things were okay. We showed up. We smiled for photos. We passed plates and said polite things. I told myself that was enough. That if I stayed quiet and tried harder, one day I would finally feel like I belonged at that table. That year I almost did not go. Something in my chest felt heavy before I even put on my coat. But I went anyway because walking away felt worse than being uncomfortable for a few hours. I told myself it was just dinner. Just one night. I did not know I was walking into the moment that would break the last thread holding me there. The evening started like any other. Fake laughter. Small talk. Someone commenting on how much I had changed, said in that tone that was not really a compliment. I tried to stay calm. I tried to be kind. I watched the lights blink on the tree and focused on breathing. All I wanted was to get through the night without a fight. Then the conversation shifted. It always did. Old mistakes were brought up like they had just happened yesterday. Choices I made to survive were twisted into reasons I did not deserve respect. I felt myself shrinking the way I always did, like a child again, waiting for it to pass. But this time it did not stop where it usually did. Someone laughed. Someone else shook their head. And then it was said, casually, like it was nothing. Like it was just another opinion. You should have never been born. The room went quiet in a way that felt louder than yelling. No one corrected it. No one defended me. The words just hung there, heavy and sharp, sinking into my chest. I remember staring at my hands, wondering how something so cruel could be spoken so easily. I remember the tree lights reflecting off the ornaments, still blinking like nothing had happened. I remember realizing that this was not just a bad moment. This was the truth of how they saw me. And suddenly everything made sense. The distance. The coldness. The feeling that I was always an outsider in my own family. I stood up before I even realized I was moving. My heart was pounding so hard I thought everyone could hear it. I did not yell. I did not cry. I just said I was leaving. No one stopped me. No one followed. As I walked out into the cold night, the door closed behind me, and with it, something inside me finally snapped. That walk was the longest of my life. The air burned my lungs, but it also woke me up. For the first time, I asked myself a question I had avoided for years. What if I did not owe these people my pain? What if staying was costing me more than leaving ever could? Each step felt like I was walking away from the person they wanted me to be and toward someone I had never allowed myself to imagine. The days after Christmas were quiet. Too quiet. There were no messages asking if I was okay. No apologies. That silence hurt, but it also told me everything I needed to know. I started thinking about my name, the one tied to every insult, every memory of feeling unwanted. I realized how heavy it felt to carry something that reminded me every day of people who never really saw me. Changing my name was not about running away. It was about choosing myself for the first time. It was about creating a line between who I was forced to be and who I wanted to become. Filling out those papers felt surreal. Like I was rewriting my own story with shaking hands. Every letter felt like a small act of rebellion, a quiet promise that I would never speak to myself the way they spoke to me. I did not tell anyone at first. I needed the change to be mine before it belonged to the world. I practiced saying my new name out loud when I was alone, letting it settle in. It felt strange. It felt freeing. It felt like stepping into a room where I could finally breathe. But with that freedom came fear. Fear of being alone. Fear of regret. Fear of what would happen when my past caught up with me. Walking away from family is not something people talk about honestly. Society tells you to forgive, to forget, to endure. No one tells you how much strength it takes to leave a place where you were taught to accept less than love. No one prepares you for the guilt that comes with choosing peace over tradition. I wrestled with those feelings every night, wondering if I was the villain in someone else's story. But even as I rebuilt my identity, the past did not disappear. Memories surfaced at the worst times. Questions followed me. Who am I without them? What do I do when holidays come around again? Can a person really start over, or do old words always find a way back in? I was learning that healing is not a straight line. It is messy. It is slow. And sometimes, it hurts in new ways. By the time the next Christmas season approached, I realized the story was not over. Changing my name did not erase the pain. Walking out did not magically fix everything. There was still one truth I had not faced yet, one decision that would force me to confront the people I left behind and the person I was becoming. And as the lights started going up again and the songs returned to the radio, I knew that the hardest part of my journey was still waiting for me. As the days got shorter and the air turned colder again, I started noticing how much the past still lived in my body. It showed up in small ways. The way my stomach tightened when my phone buzzed with an unknown number. The way my chest felt heavy when I walked past families laughing together in stores. I told myself I was fine, but some nights I lay awake replaying that Christmas dinner, hearing those words over and over, like they were carved into the walls of my mind. I began to think back to where it all started. Long before that night. Long before I ever imagined changing my name or walking away. I was the difficult one growing up. The one who asked too many questions. The one who did not fit into the version of family they wanted to present to the world. I learned early that love came with conditions. Be quiet. Be grateful. Do not embarrass us. Every mistake I made seemed to confirm something they already believed about me. There were moments of kindness, sure. Enough to keep me hoping things would get better. Enough to make me doubt myself when they didn't. That confusion stayed with me into adulthood. I kept trying to earn a place that was never really offered. I showed up when I was invited. I helped when I was asked. I swallowed my feelings to keep the peace. Somewhere along the way, I forgot what it felt like to feel safe around people who were supposed to care about me. After I left that Christmas night, I tried to build a routine that didn't include them. New coffee shop. New walking routes. New habits. I wanted my days to feel unfamiliar enough that the memories couldn't sneak in so easily. Some mornings it worked. I felt strong. Other mornings, grief hit me out of nowhere. Not because I missed them exactly, but because I missed the idea of what family was supposed to be. Changing my name brought up memories I had buried. I remembered being a kid, practicing my signature, wondering who I would grow into. I remembered wishing I could be someone else, someone easier to love. Back then, I thought that wish meant something was wrong with me. Now, I wondered if that kid had been trying to survive in the only way they knew how. People around me noticed the change even if they didn't know the reason. They said I seemed quieter, more careful with my words. Some said I looked lighter, like I was carrying less. Others said I felt distant. They were all right in their own way. I was learning how to exist without explaining myself, and that felt both freeing and lonely. The closer it got to Christmas again, the more pressure I felt. Messages from extended family started appearing, vague and polite. Hope you're doing well. We should talk sometime. None of them mentioned that night. None of them acknowledged what had been said. It was like everyone had silently agreed to pretend it never happened. And part of me wondered if I was expected to do the same. I saved those messages and didn't respond. Not yet. I wasn't sure what I would even say. Every draft I typed felt wrong. Too angry. Too forgiving. Too final. I realized that silence had become its own kind of language between us, heavy with things left unsaid. And the longer it lasted, the harder it became to imagine breaking it. I started seeing a counselor during that time. Someone who didn't know my family, my old name, or my history. Saying the story out loud to a stranger made it feel real in a different way. They didn't flinch when I shared what was said to me. They didn't minimize it. They just listened. That alone felt strange. Like stepping into a world where my feelings didn't need approval to exist. Through those conversations, I began to understand how deep the wounds went. How years of being dismissed can make you doubt your own reality. How words spoken once can echo for a lifetime. I started recognizing patterns not just in my family but in how I chose relationships. How often I accepted less because it felt familiar. Still, there were moments when guilt crept in. Holidays have a way of doing that. I wondered if I was being dramatic. If I should just let it go. If walking away made me ungrateful. Those thoughts hit hardest at night when the world was quiet and my mind was loud. I imagined showing up again, pretending everything was fine, and felt my chest tighten. That told me more than any argument ever could. One afternoon, while sorting through old documents, I found a box of photos. Childhood birthdays. School events. Smiles frozen in time. Looking at them felt like watching someone else's life. I could see the kid I used to be, standing close to people who never stood close to me emotionally. I felt sadness but also clarity. That child deserved better. And so did I. As Christmas decorations began filling the streets, I felt a decision looming, even though I didn't know what it was yet. Something unresolved was pulling at me. The name change. The silence. The messages left unanswered. I sensed that avoiding the past forever wasn't possible, no matter how much I wanted to move forward. Then one evening my phone rang. A familiar number lit up the screen. I hadn't seen it in months. My heart started racing before I even thought about answering. I stared at it until it stopped ringing, then started again a few minutes later. I knew ignoring it wouldn't make the situation disappear. Whatever came next was going to force me to face something I wasn't ready for. I sat there, phone in hand, wondering who I would be when I finally picked up. The person they remembered, or the person I was becoming. And in that moment, with Christmas just weeks away and everything still hanging in the balance, I realized the story between us was far from over. I let the phone ring out that night, but it left a mark. The sound lingered in my ears long after the screen went dark. I kept imagining what the voice on the other end might say. An apology. An accusation. Or worse, nothing meaningful at all. That unanswered call sat between me and sleep, reminding me that no matter how far I walked, some ties don't loosen quietly. The next morning, I woke up feeling exposed, like the past had found a crack in the walls I'd built. I went through my usual routine, but everything felt slightly off. My coffee tasted bitter. The streets felt louder. I caught myself checking my phone more than I wanted to admit. Part of me was bracing for another call. Another part was angry that I still cared enough to be affected. I started wondering how the story looked from their side. Did they see me as someone who abandoned the family? Someone who overreacted? Or did they even remember what was said that night? Sometimes the most painful part isn't the words themselves, but the possibility that they meant so little to the person who said them. That thought settled heavy in my chest. Around that time, I ran into someone who knew my family well. We exchanged small talk, the kind that stays on the surface. Then they paused, looked at me carefully, and asked why I hadn't been around. I gave a simple answer. I needed space. They nodded, but their eyes told me they had already filled in the blanks with their own version of the story. I walked away realizing how many narratives existed about me that I had no control over. At work, I kept my head down. Few people knew about my name change, and even fewer knew why. Every time someone said my new name, it felt grounding, like a reminder of the choice I made. But it also felt fragile, like something that could be questioned or taken away if I wasn't careful. I found myself protecting it as if it were a secret that needed guarding. The phone rang again a few days later. Same number. This time I answered but didn't speak right away. The silence stretched until the other person said my old name. Hearing it out loud felt like being pulled backward without warning. They asked how I'd been, their tone cautious, almost polite. No mention of Christmas. No acknowledgement of the reason I left. I kept my answers short. Neutral. Safe. The conversation stayed on the surface, like two strangers pretending familiarity. When they asked why I hadn't come around, my throat tightened. I said I needed time. They sighed like I was being unreasonable. That sigh said more than words ever could. We hung up without resolving anything, and I felt both relieved and unsettled. After that call, I noticed how often I replayed conversations in my head. Not just recent ones, but old arguments, old moments where I wished I had said something different. I realized I had spent most of my life preparing explanations that were never really heard. That realization hurt, but it also clarified why walking away felt necessary. A new subplot started unfolding quietly around me. Friends who had only seen parts of my story began asking deeper questions. Some shared their own experiences with family conflict, with being told they were too much or not enough. Those conversations made me feel less alone, but they also highlighted how different everyone's breaking point is. What feels unbearable to one person can be invisible to another. Still, doubt crept in during quiet moments. I wondered if changing my name was too extreme. If it made reconciliation impossible. If I had burned a bridge I might one day want to cross again. That internal conflict followed me everywhere, like a shadow I couldn't shake. I was torn between protecting myself and leaving the door cracked open just in case. One evening, I received a message from a family member I hadn't heard from in years. They said they missed me. That things didn't feel the same without me around. They didn't ask how I was. They didn't mention the pain. The message felt more about their discomfort than my absence. I stared at it, unsure how to respond, unsure if responding would pull me back into a pattern I was trying to escape. As Christmas got closer, the world seemed determined to remind me of what I didn't have. Store displays. Holiday music. Families carrying gifts together. I tried not to let it get to me, but some days it did. I questioned whether building a life away from family meant accepting loneliness as the price. Or if loneliness was just part of the transition, not the destination. In therapy, I talked about that Christmas night again. This time, not just about the words, but about the moment after. The silence. The lack of defense. My counselor asked me what hurt more. The sentence itself or the fact that no one stopped it. I didn't answer right away. I knew the truth, but saying it out loud felt like admitting something final. Meanwhile, my family's attempts to reach me became more frequent, but no more honest. Calls without messages. Messages without substance. It felt like they wanted me back in position, not back as a person. Each interaction added another layer to the conflict, another reason to pause before stepping forward or backward. I started writing things down, not to send but to understand myself. Letters I never planned to mail. Words I needed to hear but never received. Through that process, I realized how much of my identity had been shaped by trying to prove my worth. Changing my name had been the first step. Learning to believe it was the next and much harder one. Then, a week before Christmas, I received an invitation. A simple message saying everyone would be together and it would mean a lot if I came. No apology. No accountability. Just an expectation wrapped in holiday language. My hands shook as I read it. Accepting felt like erasing everything I'd worked toward. Declining felt like closing a door that might never open again. I didn't respond right away. I sat with the message, with the memories, with the version of myself that walked out into the cold last Christmas and promised never to ignore their own pain again. The tension between who I was and who I was becoming tightened with every passing hour. As the lights went up around the city and the calendar crept closer to December 25th, I knew a choice was coming. One that would test everything I believed about forgiveness, boundaries, and self-worth. And as much as I wanted clarity, all I had in that moment was uncertainty, pressing in from every side, waiting for me to make the next move. The invitation stayed unread on my phone for days, even though I had already read it a dozen times. Every time I picked up my phone, my chest tightened. I could feel the weight of that decision pressing down on me, heavier than anything I had carried before. It wasn't just about Christmas dinner. It was about whether I was willing to step back into a place that once told me I should never have existed. I tried to distract myself. I worked longer hours. I filled my evenings with noise, with anything that kept my thoughts from drifting back to that table, that sentence, that silence. But the closer Christmas came, the louder everything became. Even the smallest things felt loaded. A red sweater in a store window. The smell of pine. A song I hadn't heard since childhood. It all pulled at memories I wasn't ready to face. Another call came in late one night. Different number this time. I answered before I could stop myself. The voice on the other end was softer, careful. They said they were worried about me. That everyone was confused. That no one understood why I had cut them off. Hearing it framed that way made my hands shake. I realized how different their version of the story was from mine. In their world, I disappeared without reason. In mine, I had finally chosen to survive. I asked if they remembered what was said to me last Christmas. There was a pause. A long one. Then they said they didn't think it was meant the way I took it. That it was said in the heat of the moment. That holding on to it for so long wasn't healthy. Each word felt like another layer of dismissal. Not denial, but something worse. Minimization. As if the damage wasn't real because it was inconvenient to acknowledge. After that call, I sat alone in the dark, feeling like the ground under me had shifted again. I wasn't angry in the way I expected. I was tired. Tired of explaining pain that should have been obvious. Tired of being told how to feel about something that reshaped my life. The silence that followed felt different this time. Heavier. Like a countdown. I started thinking about what walking back into that house would mean. The same walls. The same faces. The same expectations. Would they use my new name, or pretend it didn't exist? Would I be expected to laugh, to forgive, to move on, all before dessert? The thought made my stomach twist. But then another thought crept in. What if not going meant I would always wonder what could have happened? Friends offered advice, though I didn't ask for it. Some said blood is blood and family matters no matter what. Others said peace is priceless and not everyone deserves access to you. I nodded through all of it, knowing the decision wouldn't come from anyone else. This was something I had to face on my own, whether I stayed away or showed up. A few nights before Christmas, I pulled out the box of old photos again. I studied the faces, the smiles that looked real and the ones that didn't. I wondered if any of them truly saw me back then, or if they only saw the version of me that fit into their story. I realized how long I had waited for permission to be myself. Permission that was never going to come. The tension inside me built with every passing hour. Sleep became shallow. My dreams were restless, filled with half-finished conversations and doors that wouldn't open. I woke up each morning feeling like I was standing on the edge of something, unsure whether I was about to fall or finally jump. On Christmas Eve, I received one last message. Short. Direct. It said, "We expect you tomorrow." No question mark. No warmth. Just expectation. That single sentence stirred something deep in me. It reminded me of all the times I showed up out of obligation instead of love. All the times I silenced myself to keep things smooth. I stared at the message until the screen dimmed, then lit up again. I thought about my new name. How hard I had worked to claim it. How much it represented more than a legal change. It was proof that I could choose myself even when it was uncomfortable. Even when it meant disappointing people who never really tried to understand me. Walking away had been an act of survival. Walking back in would be something else entirely. As the night stretched on, I laid out two possible futures in my mind. One where I stayed home, protected my boundaries, and spent Christmas alone but at peace. Another where I showed up, faced them all, and risked reopening wounds that had barely begun to heal. Neither option felt easy. Both came with loss. The question was which loss I could live with. The city outside my window glowed with holiday lights, calm and indifferent. Somewhere, families were gathering, laughing, arguing, pretending. I wondered what my place in all of this really was. Whether family is defined by history or by how safe you feel in someone's presence. Whether forgiveness requires accountability, or if it's just another word people use to avoid discomfort. I picked up my phone one last time that night, my finger hovering over the screen. I could feel my heartbeat in my ears. Whatever I chose next would change everything. There would be no undoing it. No pretending it didn't matter. As midnight passed and Christmas morning crept closer, I realized the story wasn't just about what they had done to me. It was about what I was willing to accept moving forward. With the phone still in my hand and the decision pressing down on me like a storm about to break, I took a deep breath. And just before I made my choice, before the tension could finally snap, everything went quiet. I was still holding my phone when it buzzed again, this time not with a message, but with a notification I didn't expect. An email. The subject line stopped me cold. It was from a lawyer. For a moment I thought it had to be a mistake, spam maybe. But when I opened it, my hands started to shake. It mentioned my old name, the one I no longer used, and referenced family matters and upcoming decisions. My heart dropped. Whatever I thought was coming, this wasn't it. I read the email over and over, trying to understand what it meant. It was vague, careful with words, but clear about one thing. There was something happening that involved me, and I was being looped in whether I liked it or not. Suddenly, Christmas dinner felt small compared to this. The conflict wasn't just emotional anymore. It was reaching into parts of my life I thought were finally separate. The timing felt deliberate. Christmas morning was only hours away. I couldn't help but wonder if this was another attempt to pull me back in, just dressed up differently. A different kind of pressure. A different kind of control. I felt that old familiar mix of panic and anger rising in my chest. The feeling that no matter how far I went, they still had a way of reaching me. I didn't respond to the email. Not yet. Instead, I sat there thinking about how often decisions had been made about me without me. How often I was expected to fall in line, to agree, to comply. Changing my name had been my way of stepping out of that pattern. But now it felt like the past was knocking louder than ever. The next morning, Christmas arrived quietly. No rush. No noise. I stayed home, watching the light shift through the window. For the first time, I didn't feel the usual dread of the holiday itself. What unsettled me was what waited beyond it. My phone stayed close all day, even though I told myself I didn't care. Deep down, I knew something was about to surface. In the afternoon, a message came through from someone unexpected. A cousin I hadn't spoken to in years. They asked if I was okay. Said things were tense, and that my name had come up more than once. I asked what they meant. There was a long pause before they replied. They said there were conversations happening behind my back. Decisions being discussed. Things I deserved to know, but no one seemed brave enough to say directly. That word stuck with me. Deserved. It was rare for anyone in my family to frame things that way when it came to me. I pressed for more, but they went quiet. Left unread. The unanswered questions piled up fast, each one tightening the knot in my stomach. I could feel the stakes rising even though I still didn't know the full picture. Later that evening I finally checked my voicemail. There was one message I hadn't listened to yet. It was from a family member I trusted once, long ago. Their voice sounded strained, rushed. They said there was something important we needed to talk about. That it couldn't wait. That it involved the past and the future. They ended the message by using my new name. That small detail hit harder than anything else. Now I was caught between two realities. One where I stayed distant, protected, and in control. And another where things were unfolding without me, possibly affecting my life in ways I couldn't ignore. The boundary I had worked so hard to build suddenly felt thinner. Not broken but tested. That night I barely slept. My mind kept spinning scenarios. Was this about inheritance? Reputation? Something else entirely? I hated how quickly fear tried to take over, how easy it was for old dynamics to resurface. I reminded myself that I was not powerless anymore. But confidence didn't erase uncertainty. It just helped me sit with it. The next day, I agreed to meet the cousin who had messaged me. Neutral place. Public. I needed information, not confrontation. When we sat down, they looked nervous, scanning the room like someone might overhear. They told me there were disagreements happening within the family. That my leaving had forced conversations no one wanted to have. That some people felt guilty. Others felt angry. And a few felt threatened. Threatened by what? I asked. They hesitated, then said something that made my chest tighten. By the fact that you didn't break like they expected. That sentence lingered between us. I realized then that my absence wasn't just noticed. It disrupted something. A balance that depended on me playing a certain role. The difficult one. The quiet one. The one who took the blame so others didn't have to look at themselves. The cousin also mentioned the lawyer. Said it wasn't just procedural. That it was tied to decisions about the family's future and how I fit into it, if at all. Hearing that confirmed what I already felt. This wasn't about reconnecting. It was about control, legacy, and unresolved resentment. As we parted ways, I felt a strange mix of dread and clarity. The conflict had grown beyond a single Christmas night. Beyond one sentence that cut too deep. This was about identity, boundaries, and whether I would be pulled back into a system I had finally stepped out of. On the walk home, my phone buzzed again. Another message. This time from the lawyer, following up, asking for a response. The polite tone didn't hide the urgency. I stopped in the middle of the sidewalk, surrounded by strangers rushing past, and felt the weight of everything pressing down at once. I thought about the younger version of me who stayed quiet to survive. About the version who walked out into the cold and chose a new name. And about the version standing here now, being asked, once again, to engage with people who never truly saw me. Whatever decision I made next wouldn't just affect Christmas or family gatherings. It would shape the rest of my story. And as I stood there, phone in hand, heart racing, I knew the next step would either pull me back into the past or force everyone else to finally face it. I replied to the lawyer the next morning with a simple message. I said I was willing to talk, but only on my terms. I made it clear I would not meet at the family home, and I would not be addressed by my old name. Hitting send felt like stepping into a fire I had avoided for a year. My hands shook, but there was something steady underneath the fear. For the first time, I wasn't asking for permission. The meeting was scheduled quickly, too quickly. That alone told me this wasn't just a formality. When I arrived, the room already felt tense, like decisions had been made long before I walked in. The lawyer greeted me politely, then corrected himself and used my new name. I noticed the pause before he said it, like he was testing the sound. That small moment mattered more than he probably realized. Then my family arrived. One by one. Faces I knew by heart, all wearing expressions I couldn't read anymore. Some looked uncomfortable. Some annoyed. A few avoided my eyes completely. No one hugged me. No one asked how I'd been. We sat across from each other like opposing sides, not relatives. The lawyer began explaining the situation. There had been changes coming, he said. Financial decisions. Long-term plans. My absence had forced questions about fairness, responsibility, and accountability. I listened quietly, waiting for the part that involved me directly. When it came, it hit harder than I expected. They needed my signature. Not as a favor. Not as a courtesy. But because legally they couldn't move forward without my consent. Something tied to the past, something I had never been told about, had my name on it. My old name. The one I thought I had left behind. Suddenly, the power dynamic shifted in a way I hadn't anticipated. I felt every eye on me. The room was silent except for the sound of the lawyer shuffling papers. This was the moment they had been circling around since Christmas. Not reconciliation. Not understanding. Necessity. They needed me. One family member finally spoke up. They said this didn't have to be difficult. That we could put everything behind us and move on like adults. The words felt rehearsed. Empty. I asked a simple question. I asked if anyone wanted to acknowledge what was said to me last Christmas. The silence that followed was heavier than any argument we'd ever had. Someone cleared their throat. Someone else looked down. Then quietly, one person said they didn't remember it the way I did. Another said it was taken out of context. Another said it was a joke that went too far. Each explanation chipped away at the truth instead of facing it. I listened until they finished, then spoke. My voice didn't shake the way I thought it would. I told them that whether they remembered it or not didn't change how it landed. That being told I should never have been born wasn't something you joke about and move past. That walking out wasn't dramatic. It was necessary. I told them changing my name wasn't an attack. It was survival. It was me choosing not to carry words that were never mine to begin with. I told them I wasn't there to punish anyone. I was there to protect myself. The lawyer shifted uncomfortably, clearly not expecting this level of honesty. I looked down at the papers in front of me. Signing them would make things easier for everyone else. Refusing would complicate matters, maybe even cause conflict that stretched far beyond that room. Then came the moment that surprised everyone, including me. I said I would sign. A few people visibly relaxed. One even smiled, like the tension had finally broken. But I wasn't finished. I told them I would sign under one condition: that the document be updated to reflect my new legal name, that it be recognized, not ignored, and that before anything else happened, there would be a written acknowledgement of the harm done to me. Not an excuse. Not a justification. An acknowledgement. The room shifted again. This time no one spoke right away. The lawyer asked if that was necessary. I said yes. Calmly. Firmly. I explained that my cooperation was no longer automatic. That access to me came with boundaries now. After a long pause, one family member stood up. Their voice was tight, angry. They said I was holding everyone hostage over something that happened a year ago. That I was being selfish. That I always made things harder than they needed to be. I looked at them and realized something clicked into place. This was the role they missed. The one where I absorbed the blame so no one else had to. And I wasn't going to step back into it. I told them they were free to walk away if my terms were too much. I said I'd been doing the hard part alone for a long time. Silence followed. Then, unexpectedly, someone else spoke up. Someone who had never defended me before. They said I wasn't wrong. The room froze. That single sentence changed everything. The person admitted they had been uncomfortable that Christmas night. That they hadn't spoken up because it was easier not to. Their voice shook as they said they were sorry. Not perfectly. Not eloquently. But sincerely. It wasn't a full reconciliation. Not even close. But it was real. The lawyer cleared his throat and said the conditions were reasonable. Papers could be amended. Acknowledgements could be made. The decision was no longer just emotional. It was practical. And slowly, reluctantly, the others agreed. I signed my name. My new name. Watching the ink settle on the page felt like closing a door and opening another at the same time. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt steady. As we stood to leave, someone asked if this meant I'd be coming around again. I didn't answer right away. I said that trust takes time. That relationships don't reset just because paperwork is done. And that Christmas would never feel the same, no matter what. I walked out of that building into cold air that felt familiar, grounding. My phone buzzed as I reached the sidewalk. A notification I hadn't expected. A confirmation email. The lawyer had sent the updated document. But attached to it was something else. A note from the person who had spoken up for me. They said they were starting to see things differently. That my leaving had forced them to reflect on their own silence. That maybe this wasn't the end, but it was a beginning. I stood there for a long moment, staring at the screen. The conflict was resolved on paper, but emotionally, it was still unfolding. And the unexpected twist wasn't the apology or the signature or even the power shift. It was the realization that by walking away, changing my name, and refusing to accept less than respect, I hadn't just changed my life. I had changed the story they told about me. And that was something none of us had seen coming. After that meeting, life didn't suddenly become peaceful or perfect. It got quieter in some ways, louder in others. The phone calls slowed down. Messages became shorter, more careful. I noticed how differently people spoke to me now, like they were unsure where the line was. That uncertainty didn't bother me. In fact, it told me the boundaries were finally visible. I went home that day and sat alone for a long time, letting everything settle. I thought I would feel relief or maybe sadness. What I felt instead was something steadier. Like I had finally stood still long enough for my own voice to catch up with me. The conflict that once consumed every thought was no longer sitting in my chest. It hadn't disappeared, but it wasn't controlling me anymore. In the weeks that followed, I slowly responded to the people who reached out in good faith. Some conversations were awkward. Some ended quickly. A few surprised me. The person who had spoken up for me at the meeting checked in again. Not to fix things, not to pressure me, just to ask how I was doing. We talked about small things at first. Life, work, weather. Then, eventually, about the past. It was uncomfortable, but it was honest. For the first time, I felt like someone from my family was actually listening. Others stayed distant. A few never reached out at all. that used to hurt more than I can explain. Now, it felt like information instead of rejection. I stopped chasing closure from people who weren't willing to face the truth. I realized that silence can be an answer, and sometimes it's the clearest one you'll get. Christmas passed quietly that year. No big dinner. No forced smiles. I spent the day with friends who knew my story and didn't need me to justify it. We cooked, laughed, and shared space without expectation. It wasn't the Christmas I grew up with, but it was the first one that felt safe. And that mattered more than tradition ever did. As time went on, I noticed how much lighter my days felt. I wasn't constantly bracing myself for criticism or waiting for the next hurtful comment. My new name became natural not just to others but to me. It stopped feeling like a statement and started feeling like home. Every time I heard it, I was reminded that I had chosen myself when it mattered most. The subplots of my life began to settle too. Work felt more focused. Friendships deepened. I became more selective with who had access to my energy. I stopped over-explaining. I stopped apologizing for needing space. Those changes didn't make me harder or colder. They made me clearer. There were moments, of course, when old memories resurfaced. Healing isn't a straight line. Some days I still thought about that Christmas night, about how words spoken so casually can leave permanent marks. But those memories no longer define me. They became part of my story, not the whole thing. One afternoon, months later, I received a handwritten letter. It was from the same family member who had minimized my pain before. The tone was different this time. Not perfect, not poetic, but real. They acknowledged they hadn't understood the impact of their words. They didn't ask for forgiveness. They didn't demand a response. They just said they were trying to do better. I didn't rush to reply. I sat with it. I learned that forgiveness doesn't have to be immediate, and it doesn't have to look the same for everyone. Sometimes, the most powerful response is taking care of yourself first. Eventually, I did write back. Briefly. Honestly. I said I appreciated the effort. That rebuilding trust would take time. That my boundaries were staying in place. Hitting send didn't feel heavy. It felt intentional. Looking back now, I see how much that one moment changed everything. Being told, "You should have never been born," could have crushed me permanently. For a long time, I thought it almost did. But walking out that night wasn't just an exit. It was a beginning. Changing my name wasn't about erasing my past. It was about refusing to let it define my future. The biggest takeaway from all of this wasn't about family conflict or holiday drama. It was about self-worth. About understanding that love without respect isn't love. That loyalty to others should never come at the cost of loyalty to yourself. And that walking away can sometimes be the bravest form of self-respect. I also learned that healing doesn't always come with dramatic apologies or perfect resolutions. Sometimes it comes quietly. Through consistency. Through choosing peace again and again even when it's uncomfortable. Sometimes it comes through realizing that you don't need everyone to understand your decision for it to be valid. My relationship with my family now exists in a different form. Less access. More honesty. Some doors are partially open. Others remain closed. And that's okay. I no longer measure my worth by how much space I take up in their lives. I measure it by how safe I feel in my own. If you're watching this and you've ever felt like the outsider in your own family, like you were carrying words that were never yours to hold, I want you to know this. You're allowed to choose yourself. You're allowed to change, to grow, to set boundaries that make others uncomfortable. You're allowed to rewrite your story, even if the people who helped write the first chapters don't like the ending. Walking away doesn't make you heartless. Changing your name doesn't make you weak. Standing up for yourself doesn't make you difficult. It makes you honest. My story didn't end with that meeting or that signature. It continues every day I wake up and live as someone who knows their value. Someone who no longer sits at tables where they are not welcome. Someone who understands that being born was never the mistake. And if there's one thing I hope stays with you after hearing this, it's this. You don't owe anyone access to you if it costs you your peace. Sometimes, the life you're meant to live begins the moment you finally walk away.